Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another installment of Flyera Gonna Flyer, our 30th installment. Here we are, 30 episodes in, a little mini milestone episode. With me today are two of my awesome co-hosts, starting with the man to my left. You know him, you love him, Mr. Eric Martino. Eric, how you doing today, bud?
Not too bad. Feeling great. Got a lot to talk about this week. A lot of interesting things that happened. So I'm ready to go. Let's go.
This is going to be probably arguably our biggest episode of the season right here, and for big reason. But I'll get into that in a second because I got another man to introduce still right now. You know him, you love him, the seasoned veteran, Mr. Jamey Baskow from the Flyers Nitty Gritty.
Aloha mahalo, everybody. It is warm, baby. We're going to the beach. There's a lot to talk about first before we go in and dive in and, go swimming.
Oh, yes, there is indeed. So here we are, 30th episode. And, it's funny because over these last few weeks, we were talking, what are the Flyers going to do? They're kind of dangling right now on the brink of the playoffs. And then they had a so-so week last week and then a pretty bad week this week. So we're looking into things. We're not sure what Danny's going to do, if he's going to pull the trigger. We even talked about Danny Briere's press conference last week and how he just felt like he was very hesitant. I even brought up maybe he's just not showing his hand. Well, he showed his hand to us on Thursday night. Midway through the end of the second period, Morgan Frost left the bench. We were wondering as to why. It was reported at first as an injury, but then something more happened. A big trade. The first trade involving a player since last year's trade deadline for the Philadelphia Flyers. I'll get right into this. In case you've been living under a rock for the last couple of days, the Philadelphia Flyers pulled off a blockbuster trade on Thursday night, late Thursday night at that. It kept me up till about midnight waiting to get all the details on this because I was too jittery to go to bed until I knew what was happening. The Philadelphia Flyers and Calgary Flames advised into a major multiplayer and pick deal. Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost are no longer with us, hence the name Fond Farewell and having Beezer and Frosty in the front of this cover. They have been shipped out to Calgary. Coming back to Philadelphia will be Andrei Kuzmenko, Jacob Pelletier, a second-round pick this year, and a random seventh-round pick in 2028. I'm not exactly sure why that was even added, but whatever, that's besides the point. Massive trade. Massive. Things have changed, and I think one thing that we can all agree for sure has been said. The Flyers have picked their course for the season. It is not the playoffs. Even though they may tell you otherwise, it is not the playoffs. So with that being said, let's dive right into this trade. Jamey, I'm going to start with you today. Let me give you your initial reaction and now your full reaction now that it has settled in a couple days later.
My initial reaction was like mostly everybody's, right? Shock, complete utter shock. From Danny Briere's presser, the week before, it's funny that he, in his mid-season presser, he was like, oh, yeah, we're not, going to do too much. We won't do anything just to make a trade. We're going to make a trade to try to improve the team and make the team better. And if that means that there isn't a trade made available, then they won't do it. It's so funny because everyone was saying, to include partially myself, oh, this is going to be the same old Flyers at the trade deadline, the same old, not make many moves, just make this one minor move for like a pick or something of that nature, and then move on if they make any moves at all. Because I think all of us were under the assumption that they would make many moves this offseason, which still stands pat. I still stand by that. I think there's going to be many moves to come. But so when this came around, I was like, oh, wow, I'm in complete utter shock. He threw everybody, one of those curveballs, I would say, and boom, voila. And here you go. You lost, a leader in Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost, who we've all been saying on every show that if you trade Morgan Frost, it's going to be a project player. Same thing with Joel Farabee. With the way his year has gone, I know we were highly pretty disappointed, with Farabee's year. You're going to get a project player, namely in return for if they move Joel. Joel wasn't the flashy guy. Oh, okay, yeah, cool. we could go get a top 6 player for. With the way his season and unfortunately his career has panned out, he's been a middle of the road type player that provides a lot of energy, and he's become an overall leader, not taking anything away from what he's done on or off the ice. As a matter of fact, I want to say thank you to both him and Morgan Frost for all they've done for me personally. Every time I wanted an interview, they were there. Morgan Frost, hell of a guy, very classy. Both players, very classy. I don't have any bad, things to say about both players. But I think Danny Briere threw us, quite the curveball there. And you got project player and a project player. Jakub, I've been watching him much like Eric, probably Alex as well, when he played for the Wildcats, in Moncton. The guy is just a ball of energy, man. He was one of their top players. Mikasir was number 4. He was the 4th best player. You can put Peltier all the way up with all those players. He was probably 1 or 2, and here the Flyers got him. He just hasn't. He reminds me of an Owen Tippett. He's just scratching the surface, even though he's just not all there. But he provides energy and can provide a big goal when you need him. Same thing with Kuzmenko. Came out red hot. His rookie campaign netted 39 goals. Finally, the Flyers have a 30-plus goal scorer. Unfortunately, the past few years, he's on the downside of what you would say, his career. He just hasn't been able to reach that pedestal. Was traded from Vancouver to Calgary, just hasn't been able to hit that next level yet. So the Flyers are certainly banking on him hitting that next level with the change of scenery. It's quite ironic that all 4 players were traded for a change of scenery, and I say with Danny Briere says, who knows? We had eyes on him, we were going to think about signing him in the offseason, become one of those projects, and hopefully he hits that pedestal. But overall, I love the deal. I think it was time to move on. I think that what Danny Briere did was solid, and we could get into more. We'll obviously get into more detail about his presser, but this solidified the Flyers fans saying, hey, we told you it was a rebuild. It is indeed a rebuild. That's what I took away, was to show the Flyers fans, when we say rebuild, it's a rebuild, because this regime was taking hit after hit each week. It was like, oh, it's the same old damn Flyers, same old this. Even when they're winning, you had those negative comments saying this regime has no clue. They said they rebuild. They're not in a rebuild. This certainly has all the signs saying we are indeed a rebuild. We're a year to 2 years away. We want to make that clear. So with that, I'll leave some other thoughts for the both of you.
So let me strip that over to Eric. I'll divulge a little bit into what you just said shortly, Jamie. Eric, let me hear your initial thoughts on this. Same
thing like Jamie. I was completely caught off guard, really surprised. Look, Thursday night, like whatever, we were watching the game. I was watching the game, and honestly, I wasn't even feeling well. Like I had a massive headache. I just wanted to go to bed. I was literally about to put my head down. I go, oh, let me check my phone for 2 seconds, and then I see Elliot Friedman tweet out like Kuzmenko to the Flyers. I'm like, oh man, like I can't sleep. Like I gotta follow this, right? So I was shocked. Then finally, like you see the end result of the trade, and it's Morgan Frost and Farabee going to Calgary for Jacques Peltier and Kuzmenko and a 2nd and a 7th also. So no, yeah, like Jimmy said, look, this was the type of trade I expect the Flyers to make with those type of players, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was Anthony DeMarco that reported it right before the season that the Flyers were trying to trade Farabee throughout the whole offseason.
Yeah.
Like, we were trying to trade Farabee. And the problem was there was no takers. At least there was no takers at his full contract at the $5 million. And Briere said the same thing in his press conference a couple of days ago after the trade. He said that, like, we had teams interested, but they wanted retention, and the Flyers were not willing to retain on Farabee. That was it. So to me, this trade makes a lot of sense, and especially like what I talked about last week when we talked about Briere's first press conference, the one that he had a couple weeks ago. And I said on this pod, I go, what I took away from that press conference was Briere telling the fans to be patient, because he's not going to trade guys just to trade guys. And look, Briere was patient, and he got a team to take on Farabee's whole contract. So he didn't have to retain. We're not retaining on Farabee. And look, personally, the way I see the trade is it's basically Peltier. The way I see it is Peltier for Farabee because you have a struggling winger for a struggling winger, and then you have Morgan Frost for the second and Kuzmenko, like to take on Kuzmenko. A bit like so basically the Flyers taking on a player just so that they can make the deal work. And look, at the end of the day, this is a risk for both teams because Farabee has always been one of my favorite players. Like I love the guy since we drafted him, and I was really sad to see him go. But like at the end of the day, like look, it wasn't happening here. I don't know what happened to him, but and it's just I don't know. I find Farabee's had a weird path. The whole time he's been with the Flyers, it's like he got drafted. I think he made the team at 19, if I'm not mistaken, had a decent year. Then he has the 20-goal season his second year. So you're like, oh, we got something here. And then he starts off the next season and he's on pace for another 20 goals. And then he busts his shoulder. So then he misses the rest of the year. And then in the offseason, he as he's training to start the next season, he fucks his disc in his back. So then he has to have the disc replacement surgery. And that was the offseason right when we hired Torts. So then they rush him. Well, I don't know if the Flyers rushed him or if he decided because, oh, you know what? New coach, it's Torts. I want to be there for the beginning of the season. Because remember, everyone was saying, no, maybe November, December. He was there for game 1. And honestly, personally, I think that was a big mistake because look at the season he had last year. Two seasons, it wasn't good at all. You saw that he wasn't ready. He wasn't physically ready. He wasn't. And then last year, he's on pace. In the first 62 games of the season, he has 45 points. That's a 0.725 points per game. Like you're like, okay, yes, finally we got he's the player that we drafted. He's the player that that we all thought he could be. And then the last 20 games, he's at a 0.25 goals per game, points per game. Sorry. And then this year he's at 0.38. So I don't know. I don't know what happened with him, but I don't know if it was just a change of scenery type thing. But look, I'm happy for him. Hopefully he could find his game. And look, same thing with Morgan Frost. We've said it before also. I think at best he's a 3C at this point. Like I think we know what he is right now. I know what he is, and that's what he is. And look, with Luchenko coming, with the Couturier contract, with Noah Cates, he basically lost a spot. There's no room for him.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Calgary needed a center. They got a center. They got an upgrade on wing. Maybe we'll see. But this is one of those trades where I think, everyone wants to say, oh, the Flyers won. And everyone's, oh no, Calgary won. This is a trade. It's only gonna be. You're only gonna know who won this trade in 2-3 years from now, until any of these guys figure out, what they are in the league. Personally, I'm really excited for Peltier because I did like him in his draft year also. Big fan of his. I love his game, and even Briere in the press conference said he's spunky, and I think Torts is gonna like that kind of guy. He seems like he does all the little things right. He goes in. He's small guy. He goes into the corners. He's not shy for contact. The only one I'm a bit curious about is Kuzmenko. I don't know how him and Torts are gonna get along because apparently there was him and him and Rick Tocchet didn't see eye to eye. So we'll see. But look, at the end of the day, from now until basically the trade deadline, there's another 10 games. So I could also see maybe the possibility that they even flip him afterwards. So I think this trade, who knows? Maybe the Flyers can even get another piece in the trade. So,
all right. So let me go a little more divulged into this as well. My initial reaction at first was utter shock. So when this trade went down, I noticed it towards the end of the second period. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I didn't really watch too much of the game after that. I did watch it, but my mind was obviously distracted. My thumb's doing the up and down thing on Twitter. We're scrolling, looking for immediate details, refreshing the button, hoping that we can get a little bit of a news drop. I'll say this. I like the trade. I do. There's a lot of Flyer fans that like it, and then I do see a chunk that don't like it for the sheer fact that they don't think they got enough of these guys. And, I tend to disagree because Elliot Freeman brought up on 32 Thoughts yesterday. I listened to his pod and his section about the trade itself. As Jamie mentioned, Danny Briere's objective in this was to get rid of the Farabee contract. After this year, it still has another 3 years at $5 million apiece. You just freed yourself of $5 million in cap. It opens up a lot of opportunities of what you can do in this offseason. Not only that, you add in another draft pick. You have the second-round pick. So now you have when I looked yesterday, you have 7 of the first 51 picks in the draft right now. That is literally the average of a pick out of every 7 right now, roughly. So they've got some ammunition. Now, listen, me and you, I think we all know here, it's very unlikely they use all those picks. If they do, I'll be even more stunned in this trade. Now, when it comes to the player aspect of things, this whole thing there's pieces to dissect about this. As I mentioned off the air, one of the interesting things that Danny mentioned that really caught my eye, at least personally, is when Danny mentioned that they had to convince Kuzmenko to waive his no movement clause because they needed him. What does that mean? Now, as another thing Danny mentioned in his presser yesterday, we'll go a little more in depth about that shortly. They were looking to get a center, but they couldn't quite get one. I attached a lot of pieces to this that I'm going to go into further, but that one comment really stood out to me. They needed him for something more. Now, you can look at this in a bunch of ways. Number one is the Matvei Michkov factor. This is a guy that Matvei played with in SKA in his first year there. It wasn't a long amount of time, but he has familiarity with the guy. He's a guy that he played with. He knows his game. And not only that, he's another offensive winger. It makes too much sense not to put these two kids on the same line. Kuzmenko, as Jamie mentioned, is kind of like another version of Owen Tippett, not quite as what Tippett is now, but he's 2 years removed from a 39-goal campaign. And he's someone that can put the puck in the net. He's got a good shot, and he could give a boost to a struggling power play that we have just been ripping on all year. The big issue with him is he's slow. He's very slow from what I've heard. And he doesn't really play that good of a defensive game. Now I wonder how him and Torts are going to see eye to eye, because we mentioned the Tocchet factor in this that Eric just mentioned, that I wonder how him and Torts are going to mesh. Is Torts going to really hammer down that he's going to want this guy to really establish his back check more, or is he going to let him play his game a bit in these next few months? Now, another thing that really stands out to me is the players that were involved for sure. Pelletier is, I think, a kid that has some real unlocked potential. I didn't know too much about his game in the draft. He's not one of the guys I really studied that much, and I didn't really know too much about him until this trade happened. So in the couple of days that I looked up his numbers, this year he's got 11 points, 4 goals, and 7 assists in 23 games. Calgary put him on waivers earlier in the year. No one grabbed him. And he came back, and he suddenly found his game over the last month plus. He's a really good locker room guy. He back checks a lot. He plays a good physical style. He's been more on their bottom 6. But 11 points in 23 games, that's almost a 40-point pace. That's roughly about that for 82. I think this kid's got more than meets the eye personally. I think this kid could go from a bottom sixer to maybe a decent middle sixer if they end up using him well enough, and he really can find that next level of his game. Now, I don't know what to expect instantly here. I think it's going to be a little bit of trial and error at first to see what parts of his game fit and don't fit with this team system. But I like the addition. He's only 23 years old. He's a really good locker room guy, too. Another thing I don't know if we mentioned or not. And then there's the Kuzmenko factor. I want to go into a little bit more, too, in his value. I've heard a lot of Flames fans mentioning that they think this kid has negative value, which is shocking to me. Now, mind you, I brought this up off screen, but I want to mention it here, too, because it's something that I think the fans would like to think about a little bit. I brought up their statistics a little bit. I want to show you Kuzmenko compared to Farabee, at least player for player, when you look at their numbers right now. So give me one moment. When you look at Kuzmenko's numbers right now, hold on one second. Here we go. Kuzmenko's numbers right now. This 2 years ago, or last year, I should technically say, he played 72 games with Calgary and Vancouver combined. He put up 22 goals and 24 assists for 46 total points. 46 points in 72 games, where Joel Farabee, in that same time frame, put up 50 points in 82 games. Now, I get it, Farabee's younger, so that's definitely something to put into perspective. This year, Kuzmenko, despite playing, I think, 12 or 13 games less, has put up 15 points, where Farabee's only put up 19. Now, I understand where Farabee is probably the most valuable player right now in this trade because there's probably another layer to what they could potentially get in him. But in his last 82 games here, not full last season, but between last season and this season combined, in an 82-game span, he only put up 29 points. That's a bit of a drop-off. And as Eric mentioned, it looked like he was finally finding his groove here. And then that last third of the season or fourth of the season, he tailed off, and he just has never really found it since. He had the healthy scratch for 3 games, and he kind of found it in that short term after. But overall, in the big grand scheme of things, he's struggled. I think it's pretty apparent for us to say that. He has struggled as a whole. So with that being said, that's interesting to me. Why did Flame fans think that this guy had negative value? Is it because he didn't back check? Is it because he was healthy scratched a handful of times? That's the part of this that I really didn't understand in their perspective of things. So in the big, just to wrap things up, because I don't want to ramble on this all day. In the grand scheme of things, the Flyers did what they wanted. Danny wanted to offload the contract. The Flyers now, especially with the cap increase that was just mentioned the day after, which makes me wonder, I think Danny probably knew that this cap increase was coming. They're going to have over $25 million in cap next year to work with 4 RFAs in Kuzmenko and Eric Johnson, if you count him, to resign. Noah Cates, who I think has probably surpassed Morgan Frost in the pecking order, which is a big reason why he got moved. He's a guy I haven't talked about enough. I'll get into him in a second. But Noah Cates, Cam York, Tyson Forrester, and Pelletier. And then if you want Kuzmenko as a UFA and count him, maybe, maybe not. But out of your RFAs, realistically, I think this team's going to have about 11 or 12 million still to work with to make a potential move. So there was a reason. I think there's more to this that meets the eye, and I don't think the Flyers are done. I think they could potentially offload more cap before this is all said and done. And I think this is setting up for a big, massive summer ahead because they are not just doing this unless if they have a plan. Danny finally showed his hand after, as Eric mentioned, after weeks, months, over a year of being patient and waiting for the right opportunity to present itself. Daniel Briere has begun his plan. Something big is coming. I don't know who. I think it could be Pettersson, but I don't want to definitively say that. But something big is coming. And it's something coming down the middle at the center position, in my opinion.
Winter is coming.
No, Alex is absolutely right. No, Alex is right. And it may happen. Who knows? It may happen at the trade deadline. It may not. It may happen in the offseason. There's one big UFA right now that will become a UFA, and it's Matt Duchene. You know, the Flyers liked Matt Duchene the last time he was UFA, but he was going to, feast on a bigger contract, and he did. He got a bigger contract, and the Flyers settled for Kevin Hayes. Like Matt Duchene, if people go back, he was going to get $8 or $9 million per year, whereas Kevin Hayes, only wanted $7 to $7.5 million. But there's one big thing, and Anthony Eric brought up Anthony DeMarco, and that was a good one to bring up. The Flyers are in no room to retain salary. Remember, they bought out Tony DeAngelo. They bought out Cam Atkinson. They retained salary on Kevin Hayes. So they've already retained, they already have three dead contracts. You can only retain 3 salaries. So that was big. So finding a suitor for Joel Farabee and not having, to retain any salary, that was, the hurdle that he had to overcome. And that's why he was like, hey, why not throw in Joel Farabee? Because these two GMs have been talking for a year to 2 years just about the, Morgan Frost. Craig Conroy said that in his presser, to the media. So they've been talking for quite some time. Another thing that Alex brought up that I thought, was intriguing is that they're about Kuzmenko. Will he get along with Torts? That's yet to be seen. There is a reason why Flames fans wanted Kuzmenko out, that they didn't care for him. Is it because he isn't legging, on back checking? Because that won't fly with Torts at all. Everyone knows that, right? But another qualification to stay within the lineup, and Torts has hinted on it. I don't know if the media has picked up on it. I have. But in terms of Torts saying one of the qualifications to stay within the lineup is to block shots. Is Kuzmenko willing to sacrifice his body to block shots? That's one of John Tortorella's qualifications to stay in the lineup. That's probably his biggest. If you don't block a shot, you're out. He'll bench you. He'll healthy scratch you. Is that a reason why he was healthy scratched? Is because he's not sacrificing his body with the Flames? Because that also won't fly with Torts. And I think that's why Danny Briere said this is something, there's something bigger. And I think that's what it means is like, okay, if Kuzmenko can't pan out the way, if he doesn't fly with Torts, he's out. We'll flip him at the trade deadline, or we don't have to sign him at all. He becomes a UFA. So he's off the Flyers books. Now it's up to Kuzmenko. Is he willing to leg a back check? Is he willing to sacrifice his body? Is he willing to provide energy? Because Torts, it's not all about offense with Torts. And he said that. And that's why he's a big fan of Bobby Brink this year. He keeps mentioning Bobby Brink. He's becoming a better checker. He's becoming more physical. And that's what Torts wanted him to be. He wanted him to check better. He wanted him to become tougher to take the puck off of. Is Kuzmenko that player? That's yet to be seen. Flames fans, I'll say this, all Canadian fans, their number one sport is what? Hockey. They don't watch any other sport but hockey. Mainly. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like hockey's the creme de la creme there. That's like NFL's football of Canada is hockey. So when they say, hey, watch this player, that's sort of like in the back of my mind, like, okay, maybe I have to watch this player a little more because obviously they know the sport well. Not saying people in the U.S. and throughout the rest of the world don't, but specifically Canadians know the sport so well. So when they say something about a player, I'm going to keep an eye on that player. So my eyes are going to be fully on Kuzmenko. They have said Peltier provides a lot of energy. So, okay, that's what Torts wants. If you're a fourth liner, identify your role. What is Kuzmenko? Is he a top six player? Is he a middle line player? Or is he a fourth line player? Torts identified Morgan Frost as a top six player. He's not he wasn't a checker, so you can't put him on the third line. You can't put him on the fourth line because he's not a fourth line. He's not that energy type player. Torts said this at many press conferences. He wants him to identify and hit his role, become a consistent player. To become a consistent player, you have to stay within the top six. You have to be a consistent player, or else you're going to be filtered down the lineup. So that's where the hole was with Morgan Frost. He just wasn't that consistent player. Torts ran out of options for Morgan Frost. So him and Danny Briere are having conversations, and he's like, hey, you got to move on from Morgan. I don't have a place for him on this team. It's not that they don't want him to be. He just wasn't consistent enough to stay within the top six. So, of course, Torts wasn't going to have him. So that's why I think that's an indicator for, Danny Briere to say, we don't know. There's something more. There obviously is. Whether they get Peterson, who I think that they're going to be in on, if he is available or not, I think that's their guy. You know what I mean? Like, I think the Flyers wanted Leon Draisaitl. I think that they were going to throw all their eggs in the basket. I'll say this. Last offseason when Leon Draisaitl re-signed, I think Danny Briere, that was plan A for 2025-26, for the 2025 offseason. I think now he's on to plan B. Whatever plan B is, I'm not sure. But Leon Draisaitl was definitely plan A, I think, for the Flyers. I think they were going to throw everything to get Draisaitl. That's my personal opinion. I'll stand by that. But now you have Matt Duchene. Is that plan B? Is Elias Peterson plan B? So will they go after Matt Duchene this year, try to re-sign him? That's possible by the deadline. I don't think the Dallas Stars are in a position to say, yes, we'll let go Matt Duchene because they're a cup contender. So that's in the back of, Danny Briere's mind. So what else does he have? He can obtain players that become attractive. Hey, Kuzmenko. Hey, okay. So we'll pair Travis Konechny, Kuzmenko, boom, because they can't retain salary. So now they've added all these draft picks. So now they have a plethora of draft picks. You have first and second rounders. So now you can throw your second rounders. Hey, I can't retain salary, but I'll give you this second rounder. That's going to be a pretty high second rounder. I'll give you another second rounder if you want. So here's 2 second rounders to take on this person so I don't have to retain salary. Or they do have Rasmus Ristolainen, who's also playing very, very well, in their as a chip, as a trade chip. Hey, we have Ristolainen. Hey, we'll give you a second rounder too, or something of that nature. There's definitely something bigger. Unfortunately, we just don't know what it is yet.
And I tend to agree with a lot of that. This will kind of push us into our next part of our segment. What's happening next? Where do things go from here? I want to mention one thing about Morgan Frost as well. Frost and Farabee as well. Before I go into it with Frost, I want to say something about Joel as a person. I wanted to see this kid succeed so bad here. He was an absolute class act from day one that he stepped in Philly. There was some reported issues behind the scenes a year or two ago. I don't know if it had to do with his playing time or not. He never made an issue of it. I actually spoke with his father in my trip to Tampa Bay last March, and I talked to him. I asked him just simple questions. Hey, how you doing? I didn't even know it was his father until he introduced me and asked him because I went to go grab a beer, and he was right next to me. And, I asked him, how's your son like it here? Just out of curiosity, he loves it. He absolutely loves it. He's embraced it. He thought Philly is where he wants to be. He's each year he has found newer and better love for this place. And you see some of the pictures of him, Frosty, Tippett, Drysdale, York, Paling, off the ice, taking pictures, like going to a Phillies game or they're going on vacation or stuff like that. This locker room was arguably the closest, if not the closest locker room in the NHL. The big thing towards emphasized, or Briere as a whole, the whole team emphasized, is they needed to create a healthy environment here because there was so many bad eggs in that prior locker room. They got rid of Ivan Provorov. They got rid of Kevin Hayes, Anthony D'Angelo. There was a handful of guys that were moved out that was considered potentially part of the problem. And this locker room, night and day, pulled a 180 and became healthy. And Farabee was a big part of that. It's interesting, too. Sanheim mentioned in his interview yesterday, him and 10 guys went out with the boys, just recollecting on memories that they all had together over the years. And it just shows how tight and close that this bondage of the team was. Now, mind you, I don't want it to hold them back. You're pros. You got to move on eventually and, embrace the 2 new guys and consider them part of the family like you did with Joel and Morgan. I just wanted to say that about Joel real quick, too. When it comes to Frost, I think what he is. Eric said it best a week or two ago, well, actually over the last few weeks. I think he's a 3C on a contender. That's realistically what I think he is. He's going to go to Calgary, and I've heard people think that they're going to unlock more in him. I don't see where. The guy doesn't back check that well. He has flashes of excellence where you're like, oh, man, this is the guy that we've been so excited to see for so long. And then 2 weeks later, he's on a milk carton again. Like, I like Morgan Frost, but I know Jamie liked that one.
Dude, yes, because it's the MIA, man.
Yeah.
A lot of young people watch our show, and stuff. And thank you so much for the support. But I just wanted to say, the milk carton, they don't have it anymore. But Faces on a Milk Carton is for missing people. So I just wanted to make that because, this is a new generation and we don't do that no more. Like the world doesn't do that anymore. So people don't know the face on the milk carton, may not know the face on the milk carton. So that's why I thought it was funny because that resonates with Eric, you and I, because, we're older, we're the older generation. But you're really showing your age when you say that. That's what I thought was very funny.
But
Make me feel
and back on the point at hand, though, Morgan, I like the kid, but there was just the spurts of inconsistency that really held him back. He has really good playmaking abilities, but it's always in spurts. It's always 2-3 games he shows up, and then a week and a half, he's like Carmen Sandiego, and you know where the hell he went. But it's
You're really showing it.
yeah. It's, all right, I gotta chill with the jokes and give Jamie an ulcer here. But that's the thing with Morgan. I want to see that kid succeed too, but I think this is what you're gonna see from him in ceiling.
He was consistently inconsistent. That was
Perfect
his
way
biggest
to
issue
put
here.
But that's absolutely perfect.
You and like we said, yeah, like if you're a 3C, that's fine. You know what? Because you're not expected to score every day. But if you're expected to be a top 6 center, you can't do that. And like I said previously, like look, now we have Cates, we have Couturier that could easily be that spot, and he just lost his spot. That's basically it.
So
Yeah, I want to say this about Joel Farabee. It's funny. So Joel, you guys may remember this. Flyers fans may have forgot actually, and that's why I want to make this point. Claude Giroux, upon his departure in his very last game, looked at Joel and said, "You know what? You're going to be a leader, and I can see you being here and taking the torch and running with it for years to come." You know, that's how much Giroux didn't. Knowing Giroux, like watching his career, not only watching but getting to know him from 2017 until he was moved. Giroux, I could tell you right now, didn't say that about anybody. I couldn't believe he actually said that to Joel. But I was like, man, you know, I like you, Alex. I was very high on Joel, BU guy. You know, I know you that resonates with you well. But like, you know, he did a lot for me when he was at BU. As soon as the season ended, I put in for an interview, and he accepted it. He didn't have to at all because he already knew he was probably signing an ELC with the Flyers anyway. He could have just, so that really spoke volumes about who Joel was as a person anyway. But like, to get that from a potential Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer in Giroux, and the second best player to ever lace his skates up for the Philadelphia Flyers, I was like, wow, okay. Wow, this guy, and at that time he was, you know, even younger than what he's still young, but what was he, 21, 22? To say that about a 21, 22-year-old with how he carries himself, I was like, dang, those are some big words. And you know what? He did evolve. He evolved off the ice. He evolved into that leader. You know, how many times has he thrown his mitts down to protect his people? You know, like a few weeks ago with Paling, he said, "I just saw red." Threw his mitts down and started punting. You know what I mean? And that really annoyed him. And you could see him on the bench being infuriated when the ref was trying to talk to Torts. You know, people looked up to, even though he was young, people looked up to him, you know, and that's what Joel, I think, was who he was. He was a leader. And now they have to replace that leader. It looks like they have another few leaders there. That's going to be the biggest hurdle, you know, with this week and the following week. You know, they have Jamie Drysdale, who's evolving now, you know, becoming that vocal guy. Sean Couturier is more vocal than I have ever personally seen. Coots is usually really soft and he's vocal. You got Lawton. Now, to me, I don't think Lawton gets moved. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think that they could lose another banger like that in, you know, a leader like that is what I mean. I just, by the trade deadline, I think that would, I don't know, you know, to the room. I think that they have to hold Lawton now, at least until the offseason, until they're able to get, you know, people in here, you know. But if they lose, if Danny, I think, shows his hand and moves Lawton now, I don't know what the room's going to be like.
yeah, I honestly, I tend to agree there. I don't think Lawton's going to be moved now either. And for all the reasons you pretty much stated, I think it's just about keeping a healthy environment there for sure. But yeah, with that being said, let's move on to where things could potentially go from here. So we've now dissected the trade, what the players that have left, come back. So I want to now kind of take a step forward with this and see what's next. What's the potential bigger move? What could this mean for the trade deadline? What this could mean for the offseason? Eric, let me start with you. What do you think is going to be happening next with this team? Will there be any other moves before the deadline? Do you think there's going to be a big splash in the offseason? Will they use most or all of their picks? What's happening next?
Well, look, the one move I could see them doing at the deadline is definitely Risto. He's the one that that has the most value right now of what we have. Like Jamie said, I agree. I don't think they're gonna move Lawton now. If they got rid of Farabee, so that's like he was a major factor in that locker room and with the team in general. So I don't see them moving Lawton. I'd be shocked. Basically, I'd be shocked if they moved him. And look, with all the picks that they have, I'd be honestly really surprised if they used all of them. Also, like I said, like no matter how many people you draft, you can only suit up like 20 players a night.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're gonna. I think it's just not productive to use all those picks. You might as well just like package them and either move up in the draft. Honestly, my dream scenario, okay, would be if somehow like if we keep on losing whatever like this season, and somehow we win the lottery and get first overall. That for me would be a massive decision for the Flyers to make because you have Schaefer who's projected number 1 right now, and then but you still have James Higgins. Ideally, would if the again dream scenario, if the Flyers would somehow win the lottery, I would take the rest of my picks, the 4 seconds, the 2 firsts, the 2 other firsts, and I'm trying to trade for number 2. And I'm trying to get Schaefer and Higgins. Okay, honest, that I would do it. They're just all 4 plus the 2, and even if you have to throw in like a B prospect, let's go. And then you'll have your number. And look, personally, what I obviously that's a dream scenario. Personally, I think they're gonna go after a center probably in the off season. I don't think Pettersson is gonna be available this off season. Honestly, because now that they traded JT Miller, I think they want to see how the team is going to progress. Because look, they traded Miller and they traded for Pettersson.
Another Pettersson.
Marcus Pettersson. And,
no, they got 3.
So yeah, so I think they're gonna see how the season goes, how Elias Pettersson proceeds the rest of the season, and how like if he's more comfortable, whatever. So I don't see him getting traded now. But then again, you never know. Like, look, if there's still something that happens and they think that they just can't have him on the team, I think then he'll be available. The problem for the Flyers in that situation is that I think if they do make him available, they're gonna want a center in return. Because now you can't trade your top 2 centers and then not bring in a center. Because that would make no sense for them. So yeah, so look, we'll see. Now I thought of like a little like I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory, but like I don't know how you guys would be if you guys would be up to it, but like I can just somehow see the Flyers may if there's nothing like great available. So like there's no Pettersson available, there's no, what if the Flyers sell off? So like this deadline, let's say they trade Risto, and then let's say maybe they sell off like another like little piece, another couple little piece in the offseason, and then next season, try and tank. Because like not like a strip it down tank like Chicago's been doing, but like if you like look, now we eliminated Frost, we eliminated Farabee, you're gonna eliminate Risto, let's say, and then like so let's say you don't resign Kuzmenko, and you have Peltier. Look, the projected number 1 pick in next year's draft is Gavin McKenna. This guy is a serious player. He was the best player on Team Canada in like granted, Team Canada didn't do anything this tournament, but like he was clearly cutting above the best player on the team.
Isn't he cousins with Bedard?
He might be. I think he. I don't remember, but I think so. I think I heard that.
Yes, he is.
But just to say, like this is one of those like he seems like I know it's thrown around a lot generational, but like he just seems like one of those players. So I could maybe see. This is maybe what the Flyers are planning. Maybe they're like, look, we can't trade for a Pettersson. We can't trade for like one of these top centers. So how are we going to have to do it? We're going to have to draft it. So I would not be surprised if maybe that's where they go towards. Now, is that what actually going to happen? I don't know. I don't personally, probably not. I think they're just going to try and address a center, like try and get like a Dylan Cousins, a Maverick Bork.
Yeah.
Ken Johnson, whatever, like one of these guys, and maybe try and build. But it
No
wouldn't
worse.
shock me. It would not shock me if maybe that's the plan going into next season. You know what? We can't find that center. Let's just like try and get them the first overall pick in 2026.
So that's interesting. I will say this. If you try trading all 6 of those picks for number 2 overall, personally, I don't think that would be enough to get it done. As crazy as that might sound, I think the teams would take, because 2025, from what I've been hearing, is not the strongest draft in the world. It's pretty top heavy. And then after like pick 10 or 11, it kind of takes a drop. And then another significant drop after around like pick 16 or 17. So, but that's just my thing. One thing that's interesting about that too, the Flyers just rose season ticket prices. I don't know if you're going to be able to sell a tank after raising prices like that. I think that could cause a little bit of disruption from the fans personally. If they didn't raise the prices, I could definitely see that actually being more of a possibility, because Gavin McKenna, oh, you're not wrong about that. That kid's going to be, he's got even a higher projected ceiling than Bedard from what I've been hearing. This kid is a player and then some. He's putting up like over 3 points a game in juniors right now. It's nuts what he's doing. This kid's going to be
points in 42 games.
What is it?
88 points in 42 games. He's 2 points per game.
So it's 2 points. Either way, this kid's going to be something spectacular. He's absolutely has the mold of a true 1C. Now, me personally, what I think is going to happen, I think Risto will probably be the next domino to fall. It just seems like the most logical. The Flyers have a logjam on defense. Oliver Bonk, Hunter McDonald, Andre just found his way back up here. Then there's a handful of defensemen that are going to be knocking at the door soon. So I think Risto makes the most sense. And with how high his value is now seems like the best time to do it. Now, I was pointing to Dallas as a potential suitor. Dallas just traded for Mikael Granlund yesterday, so that one might be crossed off the list, unfortunately, him and Cody Ceci. So with that being said, it's finding a suitor for him. Is Toronto a possibility? Toronto doesn't have a first this year. They do have one next year, however. Another team I look at is maybe a Florida, adding another physical defenseman like that. Again, another team that doesn't have a first next year. I think, does Montreal have their first, Rick?
Florida? I don't think so. It's Calgary's we've got.
You have Calgary's? I'm sorry. Yeah. I got that. No, Calgary has Florida's first. I'm sorry. I got it mixed up. That's where I got it from. Calgary has Florida's first, so they don't have their first this year. Maybe you start sniffing at the 2026 draft a little bit. But Ristolainen definitely sounds like a name that would make a lot of sense for sure to move. I think what they're going to do, I read a lot into the ticket price increase that Dan Hilferty put out a few days ago. The Flyers are projected to increase ticket prices by about $5-6 a game next year for season ticket holders. That's a chunk of change. Added up per game, that's about 41 home games. That's over $200. So if you're going to be selling that, I think you're going to have to sell this team on bringing in a name. And I think of the names that they mentioned that they're trying to advertise here. Now, this is something that's interesting to me, too. Frank on Twitter that we mentioned last week brought this name up, too, and I find it interesting. Some of the guys that they mentioned on this were obviously Matvei Michkov, Tyson Forrester, Cam York, who else? Noah Cates was one other name that they mentioned. But there was one young name that they didn't mention that caught my eye a bit. And I wonder if this guy could potentially be involved in some potential trade talks later down the line. Not that I think that it's definite, but it's just kind of trying to just attach pieces off of what I've been hearing. He didn't mention Owen Tippett. That's interesting right now. Now, Owen Tippett, I looked at his contract. This summer begins his no movement clause. So I wonder, especially with the logjam that they have at wing, especially if they bring Kuzmenko back, Is this a possible name that they could move and a bigger deal to potentially bring in a center? I mean, you have Mitchkoff, you have Konechny, you have Forster. So there's 3 pretty much, in my opinion, locked-in wingers for the foreseeable future that aren't going anywhere. Yeah, I mean, it seems like Brink was the other name I missed, by the way, Bobby Brink. Bobby Brink has taken a step forward this year. He's establishing more of a burst to his game. He's playing with more speed. He's being a little more physical for his size, which is surprising. I'm still shocked at the hit he put out in Anaheim. But I look at that, and I try to connect the dots here a little bit. Could that be a name that could potentially be moved in the offseason as part of a bigger deal? Because if they hold on to Tippett past this offseason, he's not going anywhere for the foreseeable future because of the said no movement clause. So is that something they might want to explore to a team that says, hey, we might need another scoring winger that has the potential to put up 30-plus in a year? Is that something I personally would do? Probably not, only because I think there's still more to Tippett's game. If the guy could hit the damn net consistency, that is, because he has been a bit of a disappointment this year. He had 27, 28 goal seasons the last 2 years. He's only on pace for about 21, 22 this year. So he has taken a bit of a step back. I expected him somewhere in the 30s, and it's a little unfortunate he didn't quite get to that. So maybe that's a possibility too. I do think they're going to make a move for a center. Elias Pettersson, I've been pushing the narrative on Twitter. I wrote the hashtag manifesting thing with him. That thing blew up with Flyers Twitter a little bit. I didn't expect it to. But he's a name. I wonder if offer sheets are a possibility too. Now, from what I've heard that I didn't know is you can't use your picks this year on an offer sheet, I believe. It has to be the following year. If that is accurate, I don't know how much that is. If you can't go on offer sheet, maybe the trade route too. Moving a handful of these guys. Me and you have mentioned Eric a few times. Dylan Cousins is a name that comes to interest. Marco Rossi, that's a name that comes to interest too, out in Minnesota. That could be a name that you potentially scratch the surface on. There's a lot of interesting names here that this team could make a move with, but I feel pretty confident at some point they're going to bring in a top 6 center of some magnitude.
Yeah, I 100%. I absolutely agree. One team we got to circle back to is Anaheim Mighty Ducks. Look at the Anaheim Ducks. If you want to go to moving up, okay, the Ducks are in a win now position. They've already obtained all the assets they can obtain. They're going to finish, within the top 5. Top 5 top 5 draft pick wherever it falls. Wherever it may fall anyway. So the Anaheim Ducks become an intriguing team to deal with, if they want to try to take the next step. The Flyers, if they want, could have Zegras. They have exactly what Anaheim wants. The Flyers could also, but I don't know if they want another project player right now. But Torts talked, and Danny Briere have talked about project players in the past. So maybe Kuzmenko could be moved for Trevor Zegras. Maybe that's part of we needed him. That we needed him route. Peltier is a project. That could be another thing. He's a project player. So typically with project players like that, like a Zegras or something of that nature, they're not going to get much in return. Although they think highly of them, you're going to get project for project. So maybe that's where Kuzmenko falls, to Anaheim. But would they like to give up Zegras, for Kuzmenko? I don't know. That could be a possibility. Dylan Cousins, I think that the Flyers have exactly what Buffalo would like. The funny thing about that is imagine if Rasmus Ristolainen was moved back to Buffalo for Cousins. That would be the most ironic thing in the world.
That exact thing too. They could use a strong defensive.
Oh, they definitely do. Yep. And a right-handed defenseman like Danny Briere mentioned, in his midseason presser, he's absolutely right. Look how long it's taken. This is why I think the Flyers want to hold on to him anyway. Look how long it's taken for them to finally have the right side solidified. It's taken 6, 7, 8 years to finally try to nail that down. And they got lucky with Ristolainen. They got lucky that Brad Shaw worked his magic, or whatever, he did, was able to untap, Ristolainen, because it looked like Chuck Fletcher was in a loss on that deal, and now he's become a star. That was one of Chuck Fletcher's best moves, was obtaining, Rasmus, Ristolainen. But, things are going to be interesting. But I circle back. There's something bigger on the horizon that we just haven't, put, our hands on, scratch the surface with. Rossi re-signed, didn't he? Didn't he re-sign like a month ago with the Wild?
Did he?
I don't think so.
I don't think I heard.
I thought they were under. I thought they were under contract negotiations. With Rossi. I thought they were. Maybe I'm wrong. But so if that's the case, there's something bigger.
He's still up for. He's still an RFA next year.
He's an RFA still. I wonder. That seems to be intriguing there. I wonder. Marco Rossi has been he's been that ghost, right? It's hanging over the Flyers' heads. They've always been linked to Minnesota. One thing that the Flyers they've had a good trading relationship with the Minnesota Wild. I wonder if that is the guy. I'm serious about this. I'm not trying to get Flyers fans hope here, but I think that it's not. If they wanted Dylan Cousins, I think the Flyers could have Dylan Cousins today. If they wanted Trevor Zegras really bad enough, they could have him today. They don't have to necessarily wait until the trade deadline. Look at all these trades already happening. Shoot, even in the other sports worlds, trades are already happening. Luka Doncic was traded for Anthony Davis, straight up. You know what I mean? So, you don't have to wait until the absolute, hey, yes, it's trade deadline day, let's make trades. No, if they wanted them, I think they could have them now. And it's evident, in my opinion, this is just my personal opinion, there's something bigger than Dylan Cousins. There's something bigger than Trevor Zegras. There's just something bigger. And I think, I wonder if it could be Rossi. An RFA, he's intriguing. If they throw a package at the Wild, hey, Rasmus Ristolainen, maybe, like you said, an Owen Tippett, that they could still move. Now we're talking here. Now we're talking. Because Tippett isn't making the bank. He's making good money, but not the bank, right?
That's a good contract, especially when you look down with how much the cap's going to increase too.
Yeah, exactly. So why not go after those type players now? Look at Rasmus Ristolainen. He's only going to be making a $5 million or something of that nature. Remember, it was a albatross contract. It was horrible. Now he's become attractive. So I wonder if you could possibly move those two players, attach a first, a second, and another second or another first for Rossi or whatever. This is the ammo that I wonder. I keep circling back to what Alex said earlier about the Danny Briere. We needed him. I don't know. There's something intriguing, about this all. And I'm not trying to get Flyers fans hopes up. But I just don't. If they wanted Cousins, they could get him today. If they want Zegras, they could get him today. This is just my personal opinion. No sources behind it. It's just the Flyers have what they want for each said player that we just mentioned. If they wanted him, they could get him today. There's a reason why they were in talks with Calgary for a year to 2 years. Festering in his mind, hey, let's throw Joe Farabee out there. And he was able to get it done. There's definitely something bigger. We just don't know what it is.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
You guys talking about the trade deadline with the break for the Four Nations. That I don't think a lot of teams are going to wait till the deadline to make moves. And we're seeing it already, right? We're seeing all these trades. So, yeah, I mean, something could happen in the next couple of weeks like that. Anyways, I just wanted to say
this reminds me of 2 years ago when throughout the entirety of 5 weeks, we just kept getting trade after trade after trade after trade.
Yeah.
And we were the only damn team that was involved.
But I think that you're going to see that this year because of the Four Nations break.
Yeah, that's a great point right there.
Interrupt. Continue.
No. Basically, I agree with Jamie because I think there's something bigger in the works, and I think that's also why the Flyers want to shed salary. Why they shedded Joel Farabee's salary. Why they don't want to retain, because technically, they do have, because buried players, not buried players, but buyouts don't count against your retained salary spots. So they technically have 2 more retained salaries because they're only retaining on Kevin Hayes.
So that's true. That's a good point.
And that's what Beer said. He goes, we don't want to retain salary because they're looking at 2026 as their, like, we want to have as much money as possible to do something. And,
Right.
And that's why Jamie brings up a good point, because like if it is a Marco Rossi, you have to re-sign him anyway because he's an RFA, and it's probably gonna cost you 6, 7, maybe even 8 million the way he's playing this year. So maybe that's it. Maybe there is like something bigger on the horizon. And look, you were talking about offer sheets before. As long as the thing with offer sheets is you can't use other teams' picks, it has to be your own picks.
Right.
That's why, like, if you remember with St. Louis this summer. Remember they had traded, I forget what they had traded to Pittsburgh to get a 3rd round pick back. And I remember I was like, why the fuck are they trading like for a 3rd round pick, you know? And then it's because it was their own 3rd round pick that they were getting back because they needed that pick for the offer sheets they made on Broberg and on Holloway.
That makes sense.
So
could be what Chicago's trying to do too.
So, but that's what I'm saying is like, and I was looking at their draft picks. They're not missing any draft picks except for like a 5th next season. So maybe that's it. Maybe it is an offer sheet that's coming down that maybe Briere is going to try this offseason, and you need that cap space. And so I don't know. I could see like maybe even Risto going for just to open up that even more, another $5 million plus the cap going up. So we'll see.
There's definitely, as we have been talking about, more that meets the eye than what we have seen here. So last thing I want to do before we just move into the week ahead and wrap things up here. Let's just do a little fun event out of this. So you're Danny Briere. We're going to go around and just do this real quick. You're Danny Briere. You're put in this position. You have the money to spend. You have the assets to attain. If you are in this position, what are you doing right now? Eric, let me start with you. You have the chance to acquire anyone you want or make any move you want. What would be the move you're making right now? Or maybe moves leading up to the summer that could lead to any potential moves.
Well, if it was any move right now, it's for Elias Pettersson.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I said,
agreed to make 3.
That's the need. He is the need.
Yeah,
so, like,
great. Great.
Other than that, like, look, like we've said it before, I want to, if we are rebuilding and we want to grow as a team, like for let's say in 1 or 2 years to be competitive, it has to be like a young center. Someone guys that we mentioned before, like Maverick Borks, like Shane Wrights, like the kid. Oh man, I'm blanking on his name right now. The kid I liked from Igor Shinnikov from Columbus. Like those are the guys that we should be targeting and bringing in. Like they're not going to cost you much because these are all mostly young players, either on entry levels or on bridge contracts. So, but at least they're young enough and they fit that mold of basically what we're trying to do with our young players to grow up together. So if we could have like a Luchenko and a Shinnikov or whoever and Kutz, you know, mentoring them, plus you have Paling, and who knows, maybe they even bring in another center and, you know, to compete and then move them to the wing. Who knows? But no, that's pretty much it. If it's not for like someone that's truly elite, like now look, Pettersson hasn't been putting up elite numbers this season, but he has in the past. But
he's an elite player.
Yeah. Unless it's a Pettersson, like there's nobody right now that I would say, you know what, I'm gonna throw like 10 million to this guy, because there's nobody. Even like look, Matt Duchene, I really like him as a player. I don't think he's gonna leave Dallas. I think he's gonna be like the next Joe Pavelski there. He's just gonna take 1 year at like 3-4 million to try and win a cup there. And like if you're gonna throw big money at a stopgap like another like a rando stopgap center, it makes no sense for us right now. So that's it. It's got to be we got to bring in a young center.
There's one name that you mentioned that I find intriguing, Maverick Bork, and I circle back to him because if Dallas needs more, they are a cup contender. But if they really need more or figure out that, hey, we need more, they're going to have to trade a young asset like Bork. They're in a win now mode. So trading a young, center like Maverick Bork becomes now intriguing to Philadelphia. Maybe they don't have to pony up as much, because he hasn't scratched the surface yet. They don't know what he's going to be. Although he's having a good year, they still don't know. Will they have to pony up? Maybe they don't, but like that becomes intriguing, to, Dallas. Okay, cool. I'm glad you clarified the retained salaries. So now the Flyers could possibly retain, if they need to. If they trade it, hey, if Owen Tippett's that guy, to get them over the hump, or maybe somebody else, maybe they're one of their young players, like Bobby Brink. Even though Torch has highly touted him and has talked about him, could he possibly squeeze in and steal, a Maverick Bork? Whatever they think. Dallas is in win now mode. That is the type of player that they would shell off in order to maybe get over the hurdle to become the creme de la creme. So that name right there is intriguing. I agree with you about Elias Peterson anyway. The only other player I'd move for right now would be Marco Rossi.
Yeah. So me personally, I'm in the mode of loading up for a summer of acquisition. I don't think Pettersson's going to be moved right now. I do think it's a move that could be circled back in the summer if things continue to spiral in the Vancouver locker room that has been reported. There are still rifts right now, and I have also heard reports that there were a lot of pissed off people in that locker room that JT Miller got moved. Marcus Pettersson bringing in kind of doesn't make much sense to me, but whatever. That's not my team to comment on, but whatever. Point being, Vancouver, they had some pissed off people in that locker room over the JT Miller move. So it makes me wonder if that's going to get worse before it gets better. And maybe Pettersson does find his way out. The Pettersson we want, Elias. Me personally, I'm looking to move, like you guys, Rasmus Ristolainen's a name to listen to. As I mentioned prior, you have a log jam on defense. You need to find a way to get some of these guys up and ready to play some actual NHL games and give them opportunities. I'm looking to see what I can get for Ristolainen. I don't just want a late first-round pick for him because I think he's worth more than that. I would prefer a good, solid B+, A- prospect over just a pick. Like when I take a pick, if I'm getting a first, I want more than that. Maybe a first and maybe like a second next year. Then you might be able to talk into it more. At least it's a better package compared to what it was before. But seeing what Marcus Pettersson just went for and Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci just went for, Risto's better than those guys.
Damn right.
Risto's worth more than those guys. In my opinion, he could arguably be the best defenseman on the friggin' market right now. You got to get more than just a first-round pick, in my opinion, for him. I think he's worth more than that. Either that or a B+, A- prospect that's just about ready to crack the lineup. Easton Cohen, maybe out in Toronto, is a name you potentially watch. He's a guy that I might have some interest in. As you guys have mentioned, Maverick Bork is a guy who I'd keep my eye on possibly. I don't know if Dallas would be more inclined to do it now that they made the trade that they made yesterday, but that's another possibility you could use. I don't think this team needs him, but it's always good to add a good defense. Maybe Winnipeg. I think they already have the decor pretty locked up, but adding a guy like Risto could really add a little more physicality on that defense, which is something you can never have enough of. Those are just some teams that come to mind as a possibility. And then in the offseason, when you have enough assets, you make the splash at the 1C. Marco Rossi, Elias Pettersson, Dylan Cousins. Those are the three names you watch. I want to see them. Pettersson, Rossi, Cousins in that order is my order of who I'd be most excited about. Are there maybe names that we haven't mentioned that are possibilities? Maybe. Another guy I want the Flyers to go, I think they need a good physical checking center as well. I worry about Sean Couturier and his body continuing to hold up. Noah Cates is a good guy on the forecheck, but he doesn't play as physical as I want him to. I want a big body down the middle on that third line. And the guy that I have mentioned multiple times that I think would be such a good fit here in that 3C spot is Trent Frederick out in Boston. That guy's a UFA after this year. They already signed, I think, Brazeau, and I think that makes Frederick expendable. I think he gets moved at the deadline to a team as a rental. He leaves, and that's a guy I want to keep an eye on to help, especially add some physicality to your third line as a good checker and give your PK a little more of a boost as well. I'd love to bring in a guy like Trent Frederick down the middle. I think he'd be a good add for this team. He'd be a good corner gap guy in that bottom six. It's mainly that third line, and it gives you another center too. I know he alternates more on the wing and center, but I think he can play both. But Trent Frederick's a name that I'd watch for. And then obviously the 1C, as I mentioned. And then I really hope this team drops down to maybe 5th. And somehow, some way, I'm going to assume they don't win the lottery. If they do, even better. But the name I'd love, there's 2 guys that I have my eye on in this draft that I would love to get one of either. Michael Misa, which is the whole run. If he's in there at 5, I'm running up to the stage, screaming his name before I even get to the friggin' podium. Misa, 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 Misa. I'm like at an auction trying to get this guy on this team. And then Rucker McQueen. McQueen is another guy I'd love to see here. So those are the 2 guys I'd keep my eye on for sure. Before we wrap things up, does anyone have anything else to add before we just go over the week ahead and just give a little mini prediction?
I just want to say also Ottawa. I like Ottawa for Ristolainen. I think they could really. That's a team that could really use him. And just quick, I don't know. You mentioned Easton Cowan before. After the World Juniors, I really soured on him, so he left like a. Anyway, just want to say that.
That's fair.
I agree with that one.
I know Rick agrees with it because he hates anything Toronto.
No, it's not the reason. I agree with what he said. After the World Juniors, he did
have a rough junior.
He was asked everything I saw. So
he had a bad junior.
Stupid penalties, like at the worst times. Like he wasn't productive as I thought he would be. I really saw.
Nines is another guy I'd love, but I don't think Toronto would move.
Oh, Toronto's not trading him.
Yeah, but anyway, Jamie, anything to add before we head to the week ahead?
Yeah, I think we all hinted on a lot of good things there. There's a lot of intriguing teams. Nashville's another, team that, people could circle. There's just a lot of teams,
All right. With that being said, let's move on to the week ahead. Flyers have 4 games left before going into the 2-week break for the Four Nations tournament. Those 4 games are starting today as we record this at Colorado, Tuesday at Utah, and then 2 last home games, 1 against Washington, 1 against Pittsburgh. It doesn't look like Kuzmenko or Pelletier are going to be available for this first game against the Avalanche, but they should be ready and good to go by Tuesday. For anyone who's worried about Kuzmenko, by the way, as Jamie mentioned on Twitter, it sounds more like visa issues, so I wouldn't read too much about him not being on the roster. With that being said, Jamie, lead us off. What do you think for this week?
I have them losing today, winning in Utah, losing to the Caps, and beating the Pens. So 2-2. And I think they lose today in regulation. They just don't, in my opinion, they just don't have enough. With Colorado is pretty hot right now. Mm-hmm. They're starting to heat up anyway. I don't think they have enough able bodies, to get the job done today.
Yeah, fair point. Eric.
Same. We don't have the bodies tonight. Curious to see what Gaucher is gonna do. So I'm probably keeping an eye on him, just to see. Plus, is Emil Andre? Is he in the lineup today? If you know,
I think so.
He should be because Zumula's on IR, so he should be within the lineup.
Perfect. So so good. I'm curious to see what they're gonna do. I still think, like Jamie, I think they're gonna lose. We don't have the manpower. Look, we're playing Utah and we're playing Pitt. They're behind us in the standings. Preferably, we should lose those games so we can slide a little more. Get closer to. If we want, Alex, if you want Misa, we got to slide, man.
That you're not wrong. Take 5 as the target.
And then what was the other team? Sorry, the Cap. Well, the Caps are a wagon, so we're probably gonna lose to the Caps too. Look, I could see, like Jamie said, I could see 2-2. I'm gonna go 1-3. I think we're gonna lose to Washington, and we're gonna lose to the teams ahead of us, Washington, Colorado, and I think might lose to Utah, and we beat Pittsburgh. Fuck Pittsburgh.
I'm going to go 1-2-1 this week. I think they get mollywopped today. They don't have the manpower. They're going to lose like 5-1 today. It's going to be an ugly one. I think they lose to Utah like 3-2. Heartbreaker in regulation. I think they actually keep it close with Washington for some weird reason, but they do lose that game in overtime. I'll say 4-3. And then I think they ended off with a win against the Penguins. I think they beat them like 5-3. So I'll go 1-2-1 this week. Those are my guesses. And I will put this as a prediction too. Pelletier and Kuzmenko will both score at least one goal this week.
Oh, beautiful.
Throw that in there. Each one will get a goal. But with that being said, any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
Just pay attention, Flyers fans. Pay attention, because there's going to be a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts within the next 2 weeks. So just pay attention.
Agreed.
Yeah, exactly. Just really excited to see what Pelletier can do, and even Kuzmenko, and like Jamie said, just pay attention, because I think there's going to be more things to come.
I agree 100%. This is just the first cog to move. I think the next 12 months are going to be very interesting. Actually, I'm not even going to go that far. I think the next 6 months are going to be very interesting. I will hope to see Kuzmenko and Michkov on the same line together. Kuzmenko, Couturier, and Michkov is my preferred line for the three of them. But we'll see. I want to see two scorers like that go together. I mean, like I said, they played together in SKA, so they have some familiarity with each other. So that's my hope. I want to see those guys play together.
Shoot, they need a center. They need a center, right? They need a center.
Season. It's Noah Cage's 1C season.
Listen, they need a center, so why not make it an all-Russian line, right? Kuzmenko, Kolosov, Michkov.
Oh, yeah, Kolosov is center.
They're going to trade for Chinnikov. They're going to trade for Chinnikov from Columbus.
They're going to be like the bootleg version of Detroit's Russian 5 back in the 90s.
Oh, man.
But anyway, with that being said, everyone, thank you all for tuning in for another awesome episode of Flyer Again a Flyera. This one was a big one. We were really looking forward to recording this one after the big news that dropped. Hopefully, we got a lot more exciting news drops coming over the next few weeks. We got the Four Nations tournament coming up as well. So with that being said, everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe, everyone. And as usual, let's go Flyers.